talking to Candace about the blessings of motherhood and the excitement of my grandchildren and what it's like to be a grandfather, I started reminiscing about what it was like to be a father and what it was like to be able to raise her and her siblings. And as I started talking about it, I said, you know, the blessings of being a grandfather consist of the fact that I get to do it all over again. But this time I get to spoil the children and then send them home when it's all over with, so that it can be spoiled brats at her house. We started reminiscing about the good old days of their childhood. And as Candace and I started talking, I said, Candace, you know, I need to purchase a 1995 Chevy Astrovan for road trips. Candace said, are you going to build a box for a TV again? I said, I'm not sure, because they have better technology now. Next, I reminded her of how they would fall asleep in the van as we would drive from Dallas, Texas, Champaign, Illinois, 835 miles one way. We didn't have all that money for airline tickets, especially for a small family and a growing family in those early years. So we would drive for the holidays to Champaign so that they could be with grandparents. And as my children would fall asleep in the van, from time to time they'd wake up and raise the question, Daddy, are we there yet? And I would say to them, not yet. And they would respond by saying, are we ever going to get there? And I would say, I'll let you know when we get there. And finally, after many pit stops for the restroom along the way, periodic stops to get something to eat, what could have been a 12-hour drive would sometimes take 17 hours. But finally, we would arrive in Champaign. And I would say to my children, we have arrived. We have made it. And they said, looked like we were never going to get here. Thank God we're here now. I want you to know that in our text, Elijah is dealing with a trip. He's dealing with a journey that has been given to him by God. And in terms of that journey, Elijah was commanded to get there. He had to get to a place in which God had identified for him. And with respects to that place, I could hear in my sanctified imagination, perhaps Elijah saying, are we there yet? But God said, I've described for you what that place looks like. And when you get there, you'll know it. So Elijah's brought from obscurity and set front and center upon the stage of history. God takes a man who is an absolute nobody, and he uses him to shake the throne of the nation of Israel. You see, Israel was in the grip of pagan worship of the Phoenician god Baal. Baal was the god of fertility. When the sun rose high into the sky, his followers believed they were seeing his face. When the great thunder heads rolled into the sky, his followers believed they were about to receive blessings from Baal in the form of rain upon the earth. Baal worship was a sensual, wicked orgy of the flesh, and God hated it to the core. And when God allowed Elijah to stand before King Ahab and boldly say, there will be no rain, it was a divine challenge. By the way, it was Ahab's wicked wife, Jezebel, who was promoting Baal worship among the people of Israel. Yet, when this challenge was issued, God was telling Israel, I will teach you who is really God. It is Jehovah, and I will prove it by cutting off the rain, and there is nothing you nor your God can do about it. As soon as Elijah stands before the king and issues God's challenge, he is immediately told to go and hide himself by the brook Cherith. The word Cherith means to cut down or to cut off. God tells Elijah that just as quickly as he placed him before men, he will just as quickly remove him from view. Elijah is God's man. He's God's prophet. Elijah is told to go to Cherith, which incidentally means to cut off or to cut down. According to verse 4, God has plans for Elijah when he gets there. After being at Cherith for a time, the Bible tells us the brook of water at that place dried up. Then Elijah is told to go to Zarephath, which incidentally is in Jezebel's old stomping grounds. God promises the prophet that he has arranged for Elijah's needs to be met there as well. When Elijah arrives at the brook and when he arrives at the widow's house, he will be there. When he gets there, he is assured of the Lord's blessings and provision. I want to ask you this question. Are we there yet? You say, where is there? I would answer you by saying that for Elijah, there was a brook and later a widow's house. For Noah, there was an ark. For Daniel, there was a prayer room that led to a lion's den. For the 3 Hebrew boys, there was a fiery furnace. For Ruth, there was a field owned by Boaz. For David, there was the throne of Israel. For Paul, there was a prison cell. For Jesus, there was a cross. In other words, there is that place in your life that finds you where God has placed you. There is his perfect will for your life. When you get there, you will know it. When you aren't there, you will know it also. When you get there, there are some things you will find out about that place. From this great chapter, I want to point out some truths about that place called there. I want to ask you again, are you there yet? If you aren't, I want to encourage you to find your there. And then when you find you're there, get there, and then learn how to stay there. So let's look together at what the Bible teaches us about being there. As I unload my little red wagon, Mount Arid, here's what I want to suggest to us. There is a place of promise. There is a place of promise. In verse 4, and it will be that you shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. And in 1 Kings 17:9, the text says, arise and go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. See, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. God promised Elijah that the ravens would feed him there by that brook. He's told that a widow woman there in Zarephath has been commanded to sustain him. When Elijah went there as the Lord commanded, he found out that the Lord was as good as his word. But I need to remind you that you ought not expect anything to happen until you get to your there. When you get there, you'll discover that God always does what he promises he will do. He is a God who keeps all of his promises. God is as good as his word. He will keep his promises whether you or I ever get there or not. But those who have arrived at their there are in a position to see him do exceedingly, abundantly above all we can ask or think. That's what Ephesians 3:20 says. Those who are there will see more than those who aren't. And when God puts you there, he will take care of you there. In other words, I know preaching will get you in trouble, but whatever preaching gets you in, preaching will get you out of. Elijah ended up in trouble for confronting Ahab, and Jezebel, his wicked wife, told Elijah that unless God kills me first, by this time tomorrow you'll be dead. But God hid Elijah by the brook called Cherith. Sometimes preaching is risky business. Sometimes the message is not popular, but we gotta say what thus saith the Lord. And so when Elijah called out the wickedness of the people, and he called out the wicked leadership of the king, he found himself on the run. But I want you to know that God had him in plain view, which leads me to suggest something else. There is a place of provisions. I said there is a place of provision. For in 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 6, the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. And then when you look over in 1 Kings 17, verse 15, so she went away and did according to the word of Elijah, and he and her household ate for many days. The bin of flour was not used up, nor did the jar of oil run dry, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Elijah. Here it is. When Elijah got there, I said when Elijah got there, the ravens flew in right on time, every morning and evening with his meals. And when he arrived at the widow's house, he saw the Lord suspend the very laws of nature to provide for his needs and for the needs of that widow's family. In other words, God had changed the nature of the ravens. For the ravens were known as scavenger birds. They've been known to be takers, but God uses them